Hi guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. I'm back with a super interesting episode that's going to change the way you prepare for beauty pageants. As a pageant coach, one of the most frequently received questions for me is how do I think faster when given a question on stage? On-stage Q&A can be quite intimidating and one of the most nerve-wracking parts of a beauty pageant if you're someone who requires a lot of time usually to put together your thoughts and articulate your answers. Well, in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you 4 ways on how you can actually train your brain to think faster. The first tip I have for you is to think in visuals or images. Now, this is actually also a system that has been used by Sherlock Holmes in the past. And what the mind palace technique emphasizes on is to memorize something better. And in order to recall information when you need it, on-stage Q&A and pageants being one of them, then in that case, if you were to think in images, it's easier to connect the dots in your mind. It's something so simple that we use in our everyday life. For instance, when you walk into your house, you put the keys at a certain place. The reason you remember to take your keys when leaving from that exact same spot is because your mind had an image of you putting the keys there. And that's how your mind remembers that that's the place to put your keys down. That sounds very simple, but if you practice this enough, you can also think faster in situations that need you to. Just the other day, during one of my coaching sessions with a pageant aspirant, there was a question in which this feedback was extremely useful for her. The question we were discussing was the finale question of the previous Miss Universe that we all witnessed. And the question was, if you could live 1 year in another woman's shoes, who would you choose and why? Now, like all pageant questions, it's imperative to remember that there is a why at the end of this question and to give a reason. Now, the reason can be often confused. And if you really want to not make cliche mistakes while answering a pageant question, forgetting to answer the second part of the question, and if you are that contestant, then this is going to be super useful for you. If you were to think in visuals, as soon as you visualize the woman whose shoes you would have wanted to live in, then you start imagining life in her era. Now, as you're visualizing that woman living her life, the question has asked you, why do you want to live in that woman's shoes? Which in pageant language means, what would you do if you were in her shoes? And now, if you're visualizing her life already, and in that imagination, you put yourself right there next to her, what would you be doing in that era? You see how thinking in visuals lets you come to the answer quicker. And while you're saying that, you'll be able to narrate the story. Again, storytelling being a key part of public speaking. I hope that this example was further able to explain how you can use the mind palace technique for preparing for onstage questions. Now, speaking of storytelling, I have my second tip for you. Storytelling, we all know, is essential to being a memorable, inspiring public speaker. What people forget to mention is storytelling from a POV, as Gen Z likes to call it these days, or rather a point of view. Whenever you're telling a story, it has to be that you were in that story and what was your POV. Think of it this way: if you were to make an Instagram reel about your life, you would say POV as a pageant coach, or POV as a model, or POV as a content creator, or POV as a woman. There are so many roles that we all play in our lives. Now, when you are asked to introduce a personal story, make your answers more personalized in pageants, what you can often use is POV storytelling. The second you bring in as a daughter, or as a woman in tech, as a woman in STEM, as a lawyer, as a biotechnologist, so many professions and roles that women could be playing in pageants, as soon as you begin your answer like that, it lends more credibility to your answer, and that's an easy way to get your brain to start doing storytelling. You can start with the role and build up the story as you think on your feet. Remember, you want to be a visual storyteller and not a textbook storyteller. And a bonus tip that I'm going to include here is always be aware of incidents happening around you. This might sound a little crazy, but then again, sometimes crazy lends to creativity. And what I do is I think of my life as a book that has already been written. And sometimes a lot of crazy, weird instances happen to me. And I have trained my mind to think of those instances as parts of the book that I didn't know about just yet. Thinking of life this way has, in fact, made me a quite interesting storyteller because if you were to ask me crazy stories that have happened in life, I would always have stories to tell you and not be stumped by the question because I already look at my life like a book written. My third tip for you, if you have already developed the knack for storytelling, is to tell it many, many times. In order to be an efficient storyteller, it's also important that you gauge the audience's interest and strip down to only the relevant and necessary details of your story. And this is crucial because in pageants, specifically in onstage Q&A, you only get a limited time duration to tell your answers. So you could be practicing storytelling, but if you can't finish it in 30 to 60 seconds, there's no point. You must have noticed this even in your daily lives that when you tell something interesting that happened to you to your friend for the very first time, you narrate the whole story. However, the more number of times you tell it to people, you automatically tend to give a summarized version of the story. And so, if you have to practice storytelling, talk about certain incidents of your life, and you are preparing for a competition, then try to talk about those bits and pieces and stories that you plan on using in your pageant performance to as many people as possible so that you've already practiced different versions of it and you only have the true essence of the story so that you're not rambling on for too long. The next tip that I have for you is teach. So much of what I have learned has happened because I teach and not because I was learning. Once a week, make it a point to let your brain absorb something entirely unfamiliar, something that's a very new topic for you, and try and teach it to someone else. This exercise not just helps you in training your brain to absorb new information faster, but it also exercises your brain in a way that it has to articulate its thoughts in its own way rather than memorizing a script and be able to truly understand a concept deeply because that's the only way you'll be able to teach it to someone else. My very last tip for you to make your brain think faster is to take decisions fast. I always like to say that there is no good or bad decision. It's only a decision, and it's you who decides and makes it a good or bad one. You can implement this same technique even during on-stage questions, or in fact, even the closed door interview in beauty pageants, where if you are stumped and you don't really know what choice to make, remember that there is no right or wrong answer in a pageant in the first place. So make a decision. Show them that you are spontaneous because spontaneity also counts. In a beauty pageant, the stage is just not the place where you would want to sit with yourself and take your time to formulate your response because the competition just simply doesn't allow that. And so, while you can take your time to think in other situations and aspects in life, but in a beauty pageant where you have to think on your feet, be spontaneous, pick the answer, make that choice, and then as you build upon your answer, think on your feet and formulate the justification to the answer on the spot, even though that was not planned at all. It's the skill of being able to be spontaneous in public speaking situations that also contributes to being a successful title holder. And so those were my tips for you in order to train your brain to think faster so that the onstage Q&A of beauty pageant competitions no longer intimidates you. I hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. And if you want to work with me for your next pageant, click the link below in the description box where you can book a coaching session with me. As always, I love you guys so, so much, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye.